All right, hello and welcome back. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, and today we are continuing on with our lateral movement and pivoting room. It's inside the TryHackMe CompTIA PenTest Plus pathway, and it's pretty much towards the end, so we're kind of in the home stretch now. And this would be part two of the series. Yesterday I did part one, and it was actually kind of frustrating, as you may have gathered from some of my comments. And we went all the way from the introduction to spawning processes remotely. So today we're gonna try to make at least a few of these things or complete a few of these things on video for you. And yeah, that's kind of pretty much it. I think this is a free room. I'm not sure if this is a free room or not, but you should be able to get access to it through a membership with TryHackMe. If not, then just go ahead and get yourself a subscription. It's pretty inexpensive, and that link also makes it even more inexpensive for you. You can also do it on your own machine if you have a Windows machine, and if you have a Linux machine, because we kind of need to use either Linux or you could do it through Windows. You would just have to set it up through the introduction, and they have really great instructions for setting up your machines through the introduction so that you can make sure that you actually get it and you do it. So without further ado, actually one quick note is, if you do like this video or if you like any of this content, if you get any value from it, it would mean the world to me if you could like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and maybe even drop a comment, because honestly it helps with the algorithm, and it helps us get more reach so that we can expand the community and grow the channel and be able to even put out more videos like this for you guys. So I do all of this stuff for free. There's absolutely nothing else that I ask from you except just your support, and so that you can join the community and drop a comment, maybe, all that good stuff. So that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the room. Okay, so there is one thing about this particular room that you have to do every single time that you enter the room. So you need to configure your DNS resolution, or I guess resolve your DNS. And since I'm using the attack box right here, I'm going to be using this set of instructions. If you're using some other kind of host, so it could be either a Windows machine or any other type of machine, you would follow this set of instructions. And then there is the Kali Linux version. So if you're on a Kali machine, it would require that you do these extra set of instructions as well. So you would do the same thing if you're on a Kali machine doing this, but then this is kind of an extra piece that you got to do if you're on a Kali machine, not a Windows machine, for example. Once we do that, we need to request our credentials, and then we would get a set of credentials that are lower privilege credentials, so that we can use them to enter the network. And then from there, we're going to work our way up. We're going to escalate our privileges up. And then there's a note that they left us over here that if you're going to create reverse shells, or if you're going to do anything, you need to refer it to this particular IP address, which is the IP address that gets resolved when you connect to the network through these steps. So the first step of this is to actually just connect to the network. And all we got to do is just run this command and connect to this IP that they're talking about, this THMDC IP in the orange right here. That's the IP address that's found at the very top right here. So this thing is the IP address that we need to use when we're doing these series of commands and setting up the room. So that is what we're going to be doing right here. And I'm going to make sure that this is actually full screen, just so we can get a little bit of a better view. And here we go. So I'm going to zoom in here for you so you can kind of see what I'm typing. And then we're going to set it up. Here we go. And there it is. And you just press enter with that. And if there's no error messages, that means it worked. But you always want to confirm that it actually did work. So we run this little quick nslookup command. And there it is. So we have the THMDCZA TryHackMe at the IP address that we chose to resolve. Now, the one thing that I need to do is I need to get my VPN IP, because that's what we're going to use for reverse shells. So it's going to be IP add show lateral movement, and this is going to show us the IP address that we're going to use for this entire task. So I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to put it inside a new tab. I'll just put it inside this tab and press enter so that it just shows up at the very top up there for me. And that's what we're going to end up using when we try to set up reverse shells and anything like that. So that's pretty much it for the setup of the room and the basic, I guess, introduction of the room. So now we can jump into the next task, which is task number 4, moving laterally using Windows Management Instrumentation. All right, so Windows Management Instrumentation is the Windows implementation of web-based enterprise management and enterprise standard for accessing management across devices. In simpler terms, it allows administrators to perform standard management tasks that attackers can abuse to perform lateral movement in various ways. So the first one would be connecting to VMI from PowerShell. Before being able to connect to WMI, using PowerShell commands, we need to create a PS credential object with our user and password. This object will be stored in the credential variable and utilized throughout the techniques of this task. So this is how you would do it. You would create the first variable admin, second variable password, and then secure password variable, credential variable. And then from here, we proceed to establish a WMI session using either of the following protocols, which could be DCOM, which is RPC over IP for connecting to WMI. This uses the 135 port and any port between this range, just as explained when using SC, which was in the previous video. And then we have WSMAN, which is when RM is used for connecting to WMI. It uses port 5985 or 5986. To establish that connection from PowerShell, we can use the following commands and store the session on the session variable, which we'll be using throughout the room on different techniques. So there's the opt variable that does a new sim session option, protocol DCOM, session, new sim session, and then we use the last credential variable that was created up here, right here, that uses everything from username and password, so on and so forth. Then you have the opt variable error action stop. The new sim session option commandlet is used to configure the connection options for WMI, including the connection protocol. The options and credentials are then passed to new sim session to establish a connection connect session against the remote host. Then we can do remote process creation using WMI. And these are the ports. Required group memberships is admin. We can remotely spawn a process from PowerShell by leveraging Windows Management Instrumentation, sending a WMI request to Win32 process to spawn the process under the session that we just created before. So that's the command variable where it says PowerShell command set content to this, so on and so forth. And then invoke the sim method sim session using the session variable, so on and so forth. Notice that WMI won't allow you to see the output of any command, but it will indeed create the required process silently. On legacy systems, the same can be done using WMIC from the command prompt instead of PowerShell, and it would be done doing this. Creating services remotely with WMI does on these ports, and you need admin memberships. We can create services through PowerShell. To create a service called THM Service 2, we can use the following command, which is sim session, the session variable, so on and so forth, and then attach these arguments. So notice that the arguments are at, and then there's a squiggly bracket, and then you put all the arguments inside it, and then you close it with this squiggly bracket again. And then we can get a handle on the service and start it with the following commands as such. So I'm not going to read the commands one by one. You're more than welcome to just pause the screen and read them if you want to, but in the interest of time, we want to actually get to the practical section of this task so that we can start running these things. This is just kind of an overview of all the different ways that you can use WMI. So we got schedule task remotely with WMI that's going to be run on these ports, requiring the group admin permissions, and then we can create and schedule task with some commandlets available in the default installations of Windows. So that's the command which we want to run command line. The arguments is going to be dat /c net user munra yada yada add, So basically you're adding a user for which is called Monroe22, that's their password, and you're adding it. And then the action is new scheduled task, same session to the session variable, execute the command that we want, which is up here, and argument is going to be the arg right here. And then register scheduled task, and then this whole thing runs that, and then start scheduled task. So to delete the scheduled task after it's been used, we would run this thing to make sure that we cover our tracks, and that's that. And then we have installing MSI packages through WMI. This is the details on it, the ports and the permissions required. And MSI is a file format used for installers. If we can copy an MSI package to the target system, we can then use WMI attempt to install it for us. The file can be copied in any way available to the attacker. Once the MSI file is in the target system, we can attempt to install it by invoking the Win32 product class. So invoke sim method, the sim session, class name, method name, and then these are the arguments that we're going to put in there. And then that's pretty much it for that. We can achieve the same by using it on WMIC with a command line like this. So now here's what the work actually begins, the practical stuff actually begins. The first part is that we need to get our credentials. So to complete this, you'll need to connect to jump 2 using credentials assigned from task 1. From here, if you haven't, which I have to recreate those credentials so I can actually do it. Then there is the assumption that we already have some admin credentials as well, which is going to be these credentials right here. So we're going to see how we can use these to move laterally to THM-IIS using WMI and MSI packages. We can also try to use other methods presented during this task. So we're going to start by creating the MSI payload, and we're using MSF Venom for that, which we also did in the last video. Since we're sharing the lab with others, you'll want to use a different name for your payload instead of myinstaller.msi, so we'll just create our own little name, and to avoid overwriting somebody else's payload. And so this is the command to create it. This is the command to use SMB client to put it in the admin share, and we're going to be using the admin credentials to do it. And then once we have that, this is the part in the last video that really, it felt like unnecessary, but I'm going to try it to see if it actually is necessary and if it works. And if it works, great. If not, we'll just try something else. And then we'll start an MSI session from a PowerShell console. And it seems that it should be fairly straightforward. And once you do that, we invoke the install method from Win32 to run that payload and actually get access to the THM-IIS system. Okay, so we are now in our attack box, and we're going to first SSH into the system. And I think we can just SSH as Corinne Waters, or whoever that admin was that we just got, because we're not going to be in the specific machine that we need to be. We're not going to be in THM-IIS. We're going to be in the jump 2 box. And so the idea is to go from the jump 2 box to the IIS system. So I'm just going to try this, and then if it doesn't work, I guess I'll just try something else. But for now, I'm going to do T1 Corinne Waters as the admin, and it's going to be at thmjump2.za.tryhackme.com. So yeah, it is in the THM Jump 2 box, which is not the machine that we want to be in. So we can just run the rest of this exercise and go from this machine to the other machine. So now that we have that SSH connection, we need to create the payload using MSF Venom. And for that, we need to use a different shell right here. That is our actual shell. And the command itself is pretty simple. So I'll manually type it, and then we'll change the details into the host that we need. And for that reverse shell, as we saw in the earlier example, it needs to be this IP address right here, the one that they gave us for our VPN. So for whatever reason, my tabs disappear when I go full screen, so I have to do this real quick. And that's the command to create the payload from MSF Venom. And that takes usually a couple of seconds, and it spits out something called the owned MSI payload. And then what we're going to do is we're going to transfer that into the admin share using the SMB client command. And you'll see that as soon as this loads. And there we go. So if we do ls, there is our payload right there. And so now we're going to run the SMB client so that we can put it inside of the admin share. And there's the command, and putting file owned inside of the share. So that's been good. And so there it is. So we have our file inside the share. So it seems like we need to create a multi-handler using MSF itself, the MSF console. So I'm going to run that, and that's going to end up being our listener for our reverse shell, our reverse TCP handler. So the way you pull up MSF console is literally by typing in MSF console, and it will load it for you. And it takes a couple of seconds for that to complete as well. And then from there, we're going to use the exploit called the multi-handler. And there it is. So it's started, so we can just clear the screen, and we're going to use exploit multi-handler. So there it is. I don't know. Oh, I see, because I used parentheses instead of using forward slashes. So, okay, so then in that case, I can just do use 5 because it's already on my screen right now. And so there it is. So exploit multi-handler is on the screen. And so now we're inside that. So what we want to see is our options that we can set with this exploit. And it has the lhost option that is required, and it has the lport that's already set for us. And so we're just going to run this, and we're going to set those things. So lhost for us is going to be lateral movement, and it should set it to that IP address. And then the lport, because we assigned a different port in our payload, is going to be port 4445. And so that's been set. Everything's all good. We need to set the payload to be the Windows x64 reverse TCP shell. And there's that. And now we can just do run or exploit, either one that you want to do. And so now you see it says started reverse handler on the IP address on that port. So now we have that reverse shell set up. So the next thing that we need to do is go in here inside the PowerShell, or we're actually, I don't think we're even in a PowerShell command. So I think the way that we do that is by just typing PowerShell. And now we actually have a PowerShell command. So now we need to create all of those different variables that we talked about at the top of the room. So username, password, secure password, and credential. And opt. Finally, session. And there is that. So the last thing that we seem to need to do is just invoke that sim method that we just created right now using the invoke sim method, and then that should create a listener. It should elicit the listener in the background here. So here's fingers crossed. Let's hope that this actually works. And so there is the actual command itself. And so one thing that I want you to kind of notice is that the package location is the owned MSI payload that we created, because that's what we put inside the share. And so here we go, fingers crossed, pressing enter. And we got it. Look at that. It actually did work. I am so happy that it worked. because I did not want to run around in circles again. I feel like I'm traumatized from the session from yesterday. Okay, so who am I? I am the authority system. Hostname, does that exist here? There we go. Hostname is THMIIS. Super freaking happy about this. So now what we need to do is we need to find something by the name of flag.exe, and we want to do toDev null to get, there's nothing, it can't be find anything by the flag. Okay, so what if I do ls? Oh, ls doesn't exist in a Windows system, and there's a bunch of things in here, so I don't think it's going to be in here. So if we go back and we go back here and we do dir, it's going to be that. And so we need to go into the users, and if we do dir here, there's going to be Corinne Waters in here. Yep. So T1 Corinne Waters, and do a dir here. The desktop should be here. So it's either in the desktop or it's inside the documents, because, okay, it's in the desktop. So now we just run it. So we actually just do flag.exe, and there's the flag. So moving with WMI for fun. And we got it. We didn't have to run too many steps. We didn't even need to get fake credentials this time around, or, lower level credentials, because when we entered the system, we were in the THM jump 2. We were not in THM IIS. And so the whole idea is to go from jump 2 to IIS, even though we had the administrator privileges logged in, we were just in the wrong system. And so the idea is to get into the right system. And so we did that. And the way that we did that was, first we logged in, we SSH'd into the system as Corinne Waters on the THM jump 2, and we just kind of sat there. And then we went into our attack box and we used MSF Venom to create the payload. And we used SMB client to transfer the payload into the admin share on the machine. And then we went back inside the THM jump 2 right here, and we turned it into a PowerShell session. And then once it was a PowerShell session, we ran these series of commands to create essentially our, what do they call it? I guess the session. They're calling it that we can create a session, but I want to give you the right terminology. Well, it just says connecting to WMI, we're going to create an object. So there we go. We created an PS credential object inside of PowerShell. And we did that by creating the username first, or using her actual username, then the password, which is her actual password. Then we converted that password into a secure password using the convert to secure string. And then the credential variable was the new object that was created by the username combined with a secure password. And then the opt command for the option, and the option itself that we used was sim session. And then the session was new sim session. Computer name THMIISZA, that's the one that we're trying to connect to. The credential is the credential that we created. The session option is the option that we created. And the error action is to stop. So if it has any errors, stop, don't do anything. And so invoke the sim method is the last command that we ran, and that was to invoke this actual sim session that we created. And so sim session is session, class name is the Win32 product, the method name is to install, the arguments are this, and there's the squiggly bracket, package location is going to be where the owned MSI was going to be. Then there's the options, which is nothing, and then all users are going to be false. And that's basically it. And we ran that, and we pressed enter, and the MSF, oh, you know what, I kind of skipped that. So after creating the exploit using MSF Venom, we used the MSF console to create a reverse shell, and that reverse shell ended up being the way that we connected back to the system. So let me see if I scroll up far enough, you can actually see it. No, but I mean, you saw it. You saw what I did, and you can just kind of go back to that, and you can see how we created that reverse shell using MSF console. And that's it. And now we actually got our flag, which I'm very excited about, which means that we have graduated from this task, And we can move on to the next task, which is use of alternate authentication material. Okay, use of alternate authentication material. By alternate authentication material, we mean any piece of data that can be used to access a Windows account without actually knowing the password itself. So that basically means either NTLM authentication or Kerberos authentication, which is either done through tokens, certificates, or hashes, essentially. So NTLM authentication, we kind of did review this under the Windows privilege escalation. So I'm just gonna give you like a quick overview here. So the client, whoever the person is trying to log in, they're gonna send their request. The server sends back a challenge, and then we send back a response. And then the server sends the challenge and the response to the domain controller, and the domain controller says, okay, if this is okay or if it's not okay. Basically, if you gave the right response, maybe the right password, that would be the situation. And then so if it is, it'll allow you. If it's not, it'll deny you. And then the server forwards that back to you, and then you get access to the system. So that's how that works. The pass the hash happens from NTLM authentication types. And so we would use the hash itself, or we would try to crack the hash to try to make this work. So when you do extract credentials from admin privileges by using Mimikatz or something like that, then we would get something clear text passwords or hashes that can be easily cracked. However, if we're not lucky enough, we end up with a non-cracked password hash. And it may seem like we can't do anything with those, except we actually can. We can authenticate without requiring the plain text password. Instead of using the cracked hash, we would just do pass the hash. And then you would extract the NTLM hash. We can either use Mimikatz or read the local SAM, or extract hashes directly from LSAS, whatever. Once you have extracted it, so this is what it looks like if you're trying to do it from the local SAM. This method will only allow you to get hashes from the local users on the machine. So you're using Mimikatz to do it, and then you do LSA dump, and then it dumps it. So the user admin, and then the NTLM hash for the user admin, right? That's what we would do if we were using Mimikatz. I kind of don't like Mimikatz, but I guess we're trying to use Mimikatz for this exercise. The next one is extracting the NTLM hash from LSAS. And so same thing, privilege debug, token elevate, then Sakura or Secure LSA, whatever, MSV, and the authentication ID, remote and interactive. And actually, I think this is the last command. Yeah, so that is the last command. And then this is what gets dumped onto the screen, including the username, the domain, and their NTLM hash. And then we can use the hashes to perform a pass the hash attack by using Mimikatz to inject an access token for the victim, or on a reverse shell, or on the actual command that you want. So the Mimikatz command to actually do that would be token revert, and then secure sec URL, maybe that's what it is, sec URL SA, and then the path, and then user Bob Jenkins, domain, the actual hash, and then you're going to run netcat listener with command line the attacker IP on port 5555. And notice that we used revert to reestablish the original token privileges, as trying to pass the hash with an elevated token won't work. And this would be equivalent of using run as net only, which we also did in the last one, with a hash instead of a password, and it will spawn a new reverse shell. So to receive the reverse shell, you need a netcat listener, which we've done plenty of times. If you run the whoami command on the shell, it will show you the original user you were using before the pass the hash. But any command run from here will actually use the credentials we injected using pass the hash. So using pass the hash on Linux, if you have access to a Linux box like the attack box that we're on, several tools have built-in support to perform pass the hash using different protocols. Depending on what's available, we could do this. So we could do connect to RDP using pass the hash. So X-free RDP, the victim IP, the domain, the username, and then pass the hash would be just a hash. So instead of, it's actually kind of really useful. Instead of the password, you just paste in the hash and that's it. Connect via psexec using pass the hash, psexec.py. Hashes would be the hash, and then domain at my user from the victim IP. And then only the Linux version of PSExec supports pass the hash. Just keep that in mind. Then we can connect to WinRM using pass the hash. So evil WinRM, the victim IP, the user, and then the NTLM hash. So much more straightforward than the previous version. And now we can talk about authentication. And so Kerberos authentication uses a key distribution center, the KDC, to create ticket granting tickets. My bad. So ticket granting tickets, and then the ticket granting ticket would be used to do a ticket granting service. So the first ticket grants you another ticket. The second ticket grants you a service, access to a service. And so once you create the TGT, you get a session key, which is given to the user, and it's all encrypted, so you can't access the contents of it. And it's not something like we could reverse like a hash value. So it's important to know that the TGT includes a copy of the session key, and the KDC, the key distribution center, has no need to store the session key, and it can recover a copy of it by decrypting the TGT if necessary. So the user has their hash, they send their username with a timestamp to verify that this is who it was trying to get in. They request their TGT, the domain controller KDC sends back the Kerberos hash as well as the user hash, or it uses the Kerberos hash and the user hash, and it sends back the ticket granting ticket as well as the session key to the user. And then the user can now use this, including the sessions key, to go get a ticket granting service. And so from that, the TGS tickets are now that allow connection only to specific service. And to request the TGS, the user will send their username and a timestamp with the session key that was granted, along with the TGT and a service principal name to whatever service that they're trying to access. And then KDC will send a TGS and a service session key, which will need to authenticate the service that we want to access. The TGS is encrypted using the service owner's hash. The service owner is the user or the machine under which the service is actually running, and the TGS contains a copy of that session key on its encrypted content so that the service owner can access it. So from this place, what we ended up with was a TGT plus a session key. So now we use the session key and the TGT to request a TGS, a ticket that grants service. And we would do our username and timestamp, the TGT, the service name or the service number. And then it says, I want MySQL, for example, MSSQL. And it goes to the domain controller again, and it uses the Kerberos hash, the service owner hash, and then it grants a ticket that grants service with the service session key back to the client, the user, and then they get to use the system. And so the client now gets to use their session key plus their ticket that granted service to actually operate and authenticate to the service. So that's how that works. So with that, we would use pass the ticket. Previously, we were using pass the hash. Now we're going to use pass the ticket. So Mimikatz privilege debug, sec URL SA tickets, export. And if we only had access to a ticket but not its corresponding session key, we wouldn't be able to use that ticket. Therefore, we need both the ticket and the session key. While Mimikatz can extract any TGT or TGS available from the memory of the LSAS, most of the time we'll be interested in TGTs as they can be used to request access to any service that the user is allowed to access. So most of the time, we're interested in TGTs. At the same time, TGSs are only good for a specific service. Extracting TGTs will require us to have admin credentials, and extracting TGS can be done with a low privileged account, so only the ones assigned to that account, meaning only the services that are assigned to that account. Once we've extracted the desired ticket, we can inject the ticket into the current session with the following commands. So Kerberos, yada, 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 administrator, Kerberos TGT at TryHackMe, so on and so forth, and then you would inject it. And so if you are here, if you're actually in and you do klist, it'll say that these are the keys that are logged, I guess. So the current logon ID is this person, the cache tickets are these, or this one particular one, this is one ticket. So the client is this person, the server is that person, the Kerberos ticket encryption type is that, The ticket flags are this: the start time, the end time, the renew time, the session key type, cached flags, and the KDC that's called, and there's that. So we can do over, pass the hash, or pass the key. This is an attack similar to pass the hash, but applied to the Kerberos networks. When a user requests a TGT, they send a timestamp encrypted with an encryption key derived from their password. The algorithm used to derive this key can either DES, which is disabled by default on current Windows versions, or RC4, AES 128, or AES 256, which are all algorithms depending on the installed version of Windows and Kerberos. If we have any of those keys, we can ask the KDC, Key Distribution Center, for a ticket, granting ticket without requiring the actual password, hence the name, pass the key. So you can use Mimikatz to get the Kerberos encryption keys like so, and then depending on the available keys, we can run the following commands on Mimikatz to get a reverse shell via pass the key on netcat64, netcat64 is already available for THM Jump 2 for the convenience. If it wasn't, you would need to get it on there somehow. If we have the RC4 hash, this is what it looks like. If we have the AES 121 hash, and if we have the AES 256 hash. But notice that the command itself just starts the same. So it starts for the most part the same. So it goes, all of this is the same every single time. All of that is the same every single time. The only thing that changes is the hash value, right? And then the rest of it is also the same. So the command is the same. You're just putting a different hash value in there. Notice that when using RC4, the key will be equal to the NTLM hash of a user. This means that if we could extract a hash, we can use it to request a TGT as long as RC4 is one of the enabled protocols. This particular variant is usually known as overpass the hash. And so we would create netcat listener to do it, and that's pretty much it. So with that said, we are now going to do the practical version of this particular task. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to go in the attack box again, and I'm just going to open the instructions on a different window here, and we're just going to follow along the instructions. I mean, it should be kind of fairly simple, so hopefully it will be, and we can make sure to get it done. So the first step, as per usual, is to gain access to the system. Exit out of here, please, and exit out of that, please. And there we go. And then now we can go back here as well, and we can exit out of here and exit out of that. So there we go. And let's clear both of these windows here. So the first step is to log in as Felicia Dean, which is another admin credential, I guess, and we're going to SSH as Felicia Dean, and we are going to use Mimikatz to dump the authentication material needed to perform any of the techniques presented during this task. During this session, use Mimikatz to extract authentication material and perform pass the hash, ticket, or key against the domain user Toby Beck. So we're trying to get into Toby Beck's information. Once you have a command prompt with his credentials loaded, use WinRS to connect to a command prompt on THMIIS. And since Toby's credentials are already injected in the session as a result of the attack, you can just use WinRS without specifying any credentials, and it will use the ones available to you. And we would do it with the WinRS command that's on the screen. I'll type it so you guys can see it. And then we need to get the flag on his desktop. So we can use both Mimikatz and or psexec, which is on THM Jump 2 once we log in. So first step is to log in as Felicia. So here we go. All right, nice. So we got that. So now we need to use any of the ideas here to essentially run either pass the hash or pass the ticket to get access to the the session to get access to Homeboy's information. So in order to do that, we need to, I'm gonna choose which one seems to be simpler so that we can use kind of like a quick one. I guess we can do pass the ticket maybe. All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna start with pass the hash, and if it works, great. If not, we'll move on to the next strategy, the next approach. So first we need to actually get Mimikatz or use Mimikatz. So I think they said it's in tools. So if I go in tools and do a dir right here, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of things in here. And let's see if we can kind of expand this just so we can see better. Oh, it doesn't even matter. So since this is what it looks like inside tools, we can see what is available here. Okay, there it is. So mimikatz.exe. So I think I can just type in mimikatz.exe and it should start the session. So let's see. Okay, so I saw Toby at the very, very top here. And I think it would have been better if I started with this approach instead of the first approach where we were dumping the SAM file. And so SecureLite, there we go, TobyBeg 4, and that's TobyBeg 4. And I think this might be more useful since we have the full output. We're just gonna do TobyBeg, and that's TobyBeg 3, TobyBeg 4, TobyBeg 4, TobyBeg 2. This seems to be a completely different thing. 2, 1, TobyBeg right here. And there is the NTLM hash for TobyBeg. Okay, so we have this. So now what we can do is we can pass the hash of TobyBeg using the same basic command that we did to pass the hash for the administrator. But this time we're just going to use it to pass the hash for Toby. And that way, hopefully we'll just get into Toby's machine on the THMIIS. Okay, so we copied the hash, and now we can do token revert, and that's all good. And now we need to run securl sa pth. Okay, so there's the command, and now we're gonna do a netcat listener on port 4443, and fingers crossed, here we go. Okay, here goes, and now it says if I run this, it's still gonna say that I'm Felicia, and I'm still on THM jump 2. There might be an extra step that we gotta do here to make this work. So there is the winrs.exe that should have probably been running. So THMIIS, ZA, TryHackMe.com, and then cmdxe. There it is. Look at that. Holy shit. That worked. And so what's the host name? It's THMIIS. Oh my gosh, that worked. Okay, so the winrs.exe is the thing that I think it would have actually worked if I ran it under the administrator. But in this particular case, we just did it. We found Toby's hash and we came in as Toby, and then we had to do winrs to connect to the actual part of the domain, the network that we really wanted to connect to. So that is super freaking exciting. And now what we can do is just go to his desktop and find that darn flag. There it is. Voila, there it is. No password needed. No, but you do need to know what the fuck you're doing. um, there it is. No password needed. That's the flag. So obviously, because of the fact that I had to troubleshoot as many times, it's been a very, very long time that I've done this. So it's nice. It's nice that this is like such a great refresher. And so if we went back up here and we were using the one which we were doing right here, I believe. Yeah, the secure SecURL MSV, and then we ran it, and then there was a piece right here that I missed that we're supposed to run. Or it's not even that. There's the WinRS part that I don't think it's even in here. No, it is here. See, this is the part that I missed. This is the part. But the thing is, the first time around, I only found the administrator hash, and so I didn't have Toby's hash, and I wasn't logged in as Toby. I was logged in as the administrator. I can only imagine that being logged in as the administrator would have also given us access to Toby's desktop to be able to see everything. So we could have just ran WinRS as the admin to make it happen, but we were able to do it as Toby. And the first time that I ran, I'm gonna leave that part of this up. I'm not gonna edit that out because I want that to be there for reference. But I think from what I remember, I'm not sure, but the first time that I ran this part, oh no, you know what? No, I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I did the LSA SAM. I did LSA dump SAM, and it gave me the administrator, and that's what the issue was. So that output didn't give me anything for Toby, but this particular one was the one that we did the second time around. So I think I'm probably gonna end up cutting that out just for the interest of brevity and keeping the video short and straight to the point. But just for your notes, just so you know, when I ran this particular part of the exercise, so when I did privilege debug, whatever, and then I did LSA dump SAM, it only gave me the administrator username and hash. It didn't give me anything else except for the guest, and that's useless. So when you run SecURL MSV, that would actually show you everything that you would need for, sorry about the noise in the background, you guys. I don't know if this is being picked up or not, and these people around here are sometimes very just assholes, for real. So when you run the SecURL MSV, it'll actually dump all of the hashes for all of the users, and that's what you just saw. And then from that, we could find Toby, whatever his name is, and his NTLM hash, and then we were able to run the token revert. We were able to run this particular command, and then once we had that, we could run the netcat listener and press enter on this command, and then it would connect to the netcat listener as the system, and then we would do this part, this thing right here, so that it actually connects to the THM IIS portion of the network. And then from there, you actually saw immediately that it turned us into Toby Beck, and we got on his desktop and we got his flag. So that is it for this particular task. And in the interest of brevity, I'm going to just cut this off, and then we'll do a part 3 of this room, so you'll have just easier time to navigate through this whole thing. It's your boy Hank Hackerson at Hank Hacks Hackers, your favorite system and network attacker, and this is it for this session. We are going to continue on for user behavior and port forwarding in the next session, and you'll be able to find that using the link in the description below. If you got anything out of this video, if you learned anything, if you liked what you saw, if it helped you speed up your process and work through some of the bugs that you're working with, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and even drop a comment in the comment section, because it helps us with the algorithm so that we can get more reach and grow the channel and grow the community. I don't ask anything else from you apart from that. That's all I ask. I will put out all these videos all the time, at least once a day, as you've probably seen if you've been a follower for a while. It comes out regularly. So apart from just asking you to like and comment and subscribe and all that stuff, there's nothing else that I got. that I want to push on you. So if you can do that, that would be amazing. If not, no hard feelings. I hope you at least learned and you were able to push through this particular exercise because it is kind of a challenging exercise. So peace, love, and chicken grease. If no one else loves you, Hank loves you. And I will see you in the next session, which is going to be session 3, part 3 of the lateral movement and pivoting room in TryHackMe. Talk to you soon.